Hey guys, a successful fuel tank drop for my 1994 Dodge Van B250. I was able to finally get it dropped and clean past couple of weekends. I just wanted to recap what I replaced. So where the ended of my last video was I was going to end up doing the fuel tank clean out slash replacement or clean out, and then replace the fuel pump and then see why we had rust, a tinge of yellow, tinge of orange in our fuel. So it turns out that the grommet, which was called, it's technically called the fuel tank grommet seal that goes around the at the end of the filler neck process. When you put gas in your vehicle, there's this extension that goes into the fuel tank itself, and this is the part that was actually had some rust in the inside. Not a lot, but it had some on the inside and some on the outside. So every time I was putting the few times that I put gas in there, it would go in. The filler neck seal, which is this part, is already deteriorated big time. It's falling apart, it's falling into pieces there. This was on the actual fuel tank, so when it would go in there, when it was in there, and the gas was starting to fill, there was not really technically it wasn't sealed properly because it was all loose, and that's why it was coming out. But on the way it was coming out, it was retouching the pipe, and right when it was coming out, it was turning the fuel a tinge of orange. So I replaced this, which I'll show you where I replaced it, which is right here on the edge of the at the bottom of the fuel tank. This is the fuel tank seal and grommet slash seal. They call it many things, but it depends on where you get it from. And then the other part that I ended up replacing was the vent valve seal. So it has two vent valves, and one of them, which is still currently on the original, there's nothing really to that one. That's pretty much well maintained. It was the second one that had the issue. So when I had originally dropped the tank, this actually popped out of the actual fuel tank and it sort of sat there. I didn't realize until after I came back that it was still sitting on the line. And when I finally took it off, I noticed that the actual grommet around this actual vent valve had deteriorated and was it was loose. So when it was on there, it was floating around. Of course, grommets and seals are supposed to be tight, and this one wasn't. It was just free floating. So when the tank fell, dropped the tank, it popped out, and that's why it was loose. So I ended up, that was probably the most challenging and the toughest part to replace. Is not the actual vent valve, but it was the actual grommet that was real challenging to replace. The the gasoline seal, the seal that goes into the tank, I ended up replacing that through my favorite auto parts online place is rockauto.com. I go through all my parts I go through there. And not only do I look forward to the parts, I look forward to their magnets. Just an FYI. Um, for those of you who order from there, understand what I'm talking about. And so I replaced this part, which was only like $8, I think, $8.99, but they get you because it's that plus the shipping. And then the grommet, that they didn't have the grommet on rockauto.com. They had the actual vent valve, but the grommet, I couldn't find it. So I had to do my next step. I had to go to the junkyards. I went to the junkyards. I looked at pretty much the decade of the 80s and the 90s, all models, all US models, Chevy, Dodge, Ford, Jeep, which is Chrysler, also somewhat the same thing. All their gas tanks, went through all their vent valves, and some of them that were on there still on there, but I didn't want to spend the time to go through that. That's a process just to drop it. So I went around just to see what was on there. People had taken off parts. I just sort of scoured the area and found some. Sort of still hesitant, but the other place that I actually ended up looking was I went straight to Google, typed in the year, model, make, grommet or vent valve slash grommet, and then a Amazon part came up, and so I went to Amazon. They have an auto section in there, and sure enough, that grommet was sold together as the vent valve itself with the actual grommet, the grommets that around came with it. Excuse me. So I was able to get it. I looked at some of the information on there, and it had just a large line of years and models of what it was actually supposed to go to, which in that case was a Dodge and Jeep Chrysler models that were pretty predominantly on there. So I figured, well, if it's going through all that, it's probably going to have to take a stretch. So that was only, I think it was only like, I can't remember the price, 15 bucks. I'll double check that price. It wasn't even that much. It was less than, I think it was $12, 12 or $13 for everything. So I was able to order it, bring it in. So I sort of did two things. When I went to the junkyard, found some miscellaneous grommets. Then this was supposed to be in the next day, and it literally was in the next day. And I was able to get them all in, and I tried them all. And sure enough, the one that really fit properly was the one off Amazon. So I ended up putting that one in there. So I ended up replacing the filler neck gas tank seal with the vent valve grommet in here. The good news out of all this, not only did I find the parts, obviously the good news, but the other good news was that I was able to notice two things. It's a plastic fuel tank. It is not a metal or steel, so the rust wasn't coming from the tank. It was coming from the filler neck extra piece on there and the fuel pump. I reached out to the previous owner, had some texts go back and forth, and he let me know that the fuel pump was brand new when they redid it not too long ago, and then the fuel filter, which is currently on the actual van itself. So that alone, I had noticed that because the original model fuel pump was designed differently. This is the new one. I looked, compared them both, and sure enough, this was the new one. So didn't have to actually buy a new tank because it's plastic. Didn't have to change out the fuel pump because it already came through it. So thank you guys who did the work on it before for changing it. And then the vent valves is all I had to do. So just not enough time during the day. My short weekends and my short days during the week and my weekends go by pretty quick, especially when you have to do quitting time at 2 o'clock because it's 110 degrees out. So that's it. Just want to give you a quick update on that. Not only for my vlog purposes, but if you're out there and you're looking to look at this process, and if you're working on these 92, in my case, 94 Dodge vans or that year, that decade of vans, feel free to comment below if you're interested in looking at these parts. Um, I'll definitely get you that information. It wasn't really hard to find after some research. So it turned out to be, like I said, a successful fuel tank drop. Now, from this point on, I just got to strap it back up and put it back on. Thank you guys. We will see you on the next one.